One spilled tray, one stolen dance. When server Alana Brooks ruins billionaire Julian Marchand's tux at the city's most elite gala, she expects to be fired, not swept into a world of secrets, scrutiny, and possibly love. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The city lights twinkled against the dark sky as Alana Brooks adjusted her plain black uniform in the employee bathroom of the Grand Harbor Hotel. At 33, she had worked more catering jobs than she could count, but tonight was different. The Blackstone Gala wasn't just any event, it was the social highlight of the year. Remember, don't make eye contact with the guests, Jenny, the catering supervisor, reminded the staff as they gathered in the service area. You're here to serve, not to be seen, Alana nodded, pinning her curly brown hair under the required cap. She didn't need the reminder. So after years of working jobs like this, she'd mastered the art of invisibility. Becoming part of the background was how she survived. "These shoes are killing me already," she whispered to Marco, another server who'd been assigned to her section. She'd borrowed the black pumps from her neighbor, since her own pair had finally fallen apart last month. "Just 6 hours to go," Marco said with a sympathetic smile. "Think of the overtime pay." Alana thought about the pile of bills waiting on her kitchen table, the overdue rent notice, the electric bill with its threatening red stamp, her mother's medication costs. Yes, the overtime would help, but it would barely make a dent. The glass-domed ballroom of the Grand Harbor Hotel was transformed into a wonderland of crystal and light. Chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables draped in white silk. Fresh flowers perfumed the air. Outside the massive windows, the harbor waters reflected. The stars. "It's like a fairy tale," Alana murmured despite herself as she arranged glasses on her serving tray. "A fairy tale we're not invited to," Marco replied with a wink. "Now remember, Section 4 is all yours. That includes the host's table, so don't mess up." Alana's stomach tightened. "The host's table? You mean Julian Marchand himself? The billionaire bachelor? The man who hasn't smiled since his sister died 2 years ago? The guy who could buy and sell this hotel as a weekend hobby?" Taking a deep breath, Alana lifted her tray and stepped out onto the ballroom floor. The guests were arriving, women in designer gowns that probably cost more than she made in a year, men in custom tuxedos with diamond cufflinks. They laughed and air-kissed and clinked champagne glasses, oblivious to the servers moving among them. Just as she'd been trained, Alana kept her eyes lowered, her movements efficient. She offered champagne, cleared empty glasses, and faded back to refill her tray. No one thanked her, no one noticed her, just as it should be. Then Julian Marchand arrived. A hush fell over the crowd as he entered. Even without looking directly at him, Alana could feel his presence. At 41, Julian Marchand wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. His investment firm controlled billions, and a single word from him could make or break the stock market. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, but there was a distance to him. His dark eyes revealed nothing, his smile never reaching them. The rumors were true. Grief had hollowed him out. "That's him," Marco whispered as they passed in the service corridor. "They say he hasn't dated anyone since his sister's death." Apparently they were really close. Alana looked across the room at the man everyone was watching. He was handsome in a severe way. Tall, with dark hair just starting to silver at the temples, his tuxedo clearly tailored to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. But it was the loneliness surrounding him that struck her, like an invisible wall, keeping everyone at a distance. The evening progressed smoothly. Dinner was served, speeches were made, and donations poured in for whatever charity was being honored. Alana moved back and forth from the kitchen, serving courses and clearing plates, her feet screaming in the borrowed shoes. "Last round of wine service before dessert," Jenny announced to the staff. "Then we're in the home stretch." Balancing a tray of red wine glasses, Alana made her way to the host's table. Her section, her responsibility. Julian Marchand sat with his back straight, barely touching his food, nodding at whatever the woman beside him was saying. Something about him made Alana pause. Perhaps the way his fingers kept absently touching the silver watch on his wrist, or the distant look in his eyes whenever he thought no one was watching. "He looks as out of place as I feel," she thought suddenly. That's when it happened. Another server, new and nervous, backed up without looking, bumping hard into Alana. She stumbled, her balance already compromised by the too tight shoes. The tray tilted, wine glasses slid. Red liquid splashed across the white tablecloth and directly onto Julian Marchand's pristine white shirt and custom tuxedo jacket. Time seemed to stop. The music faded. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Every eye in the ballroom turned to stare. Crimson spread across the expensive fabric. Julian Marchand stood, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "I'm so sorry," Alana gasped, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "I'm so sorry, sir." She fumbled for the napkin at his place setting, then realized that touching him would only make things worse. This would cost her the job for sure. Maybe even a demand to pay for the ruined suit, money she absolutely didn't have. "It was my fault," she stammered, head bowed, awaiting her sentence. "I'll go get the manager." But instead of the angry outburst she expected, there was silence. When she finally dared to look up, Julian Marchand was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Then he did the unthinkable. He reached out and gently took the empty tray from her trembling hands, setting it aside on the table. His movement was careful, deliberate. "It's just a suit," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly soft. Then, louder so others could hear, "But you? You look like you could use a dance." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Phones appeared, cameras, flashing. The woman seated beside Julian, some socialite with diamonds dripping from her ears, looked as though she'd been slapped. I don't... Alana couldn't form a coherent sentence. This had to be some cruel joke. Any second now, he'd laugh and have security escort her out. But Julian Marchand didn't laugh. Instead, he held out his hand. "One dance. Unless you'd prefer I call your supervisor." It wasn't really a choice. With her apron stained with wine and her borrowed shoes pinching her toes, Alana placed her hand in his. It was warm, his grip firm, but gentle as he led her to the center of the dance floor. The orchestra, after a confused pause and a nod from Julian, began to play again. A slow waltz. "I don't know how to dance like this," she whispered, mortified as he placed his other hand lightly on her waist. "Just follow my lead," he replied, guiding her into the steps. "And breathe. You look like you might faint." "Why are you doing this?" Alana asked, her voice barely audible over the music. "I ruined your suit." Something flickered in his eyes, a spark of... what? Amusement? Interest? Maybe I was bored of pretending to enjoy myself. Maybe I wanted to give them something real to talk about for once. As they moved slowly across the floor, Alana became aware of just how close they were. She could smell his cologne, something expensive but subtle. She could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, despite a close shave. He wasn't just handsome, he was real, human. "They're all watching us," she said, trying not to step on his polished shoes. "Let them watch." For the first time, a hint of a smile touched his lips. "You have a name?" "Alana. Alana Brooks. Julian Marchand." She almost laughed. "I know who you are. And yet you're the first person tonight who's looked at me like I'm just a man, not a bank account." The music continued, and strangely Alana began to relax. The steps came easier. The stairs bothered her less. For just this moment she allowed herself to be seen. When the dance ended, Julian stepped back and gave her a small bow. "Thank you, Alana Brooks." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, cutting through the crowd of stunned onlookers as if they weren't there. The spell broken, Alana hurried back to the service area, her heart pounding. Jenny was waiting, her face white with shock. "What was that? Do you know who that was?" "I'm fired, aren't I?" Alana asked, removing her cap and letting her curls fall free. To her surprise, Jenny shook her head. "Mr. Marchand's assistant just came by. He said you're to take the rest of the night off with full pay." Marco appeared beside them, eyes wide. "Alana, you're all over social media already. Someone posted a video of the dance." He held up his phone, showing her the image that would soon be everywhere. Julian Marchand, the billionaire who never smiled, with his hand resting on the back of a server in a wine-stained apron, both of them suspended in a moment that looked Magical. I just want to go home, Alana said, suddenly exhausted. 2 hours later, changed back into her jeans and sweater, Alana sat on the bus headed to her small apartment in the unfashionable part of town. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from co-workers who'd seen the video, asking what Julian Marchand had said, what it felt like to dance with him. She didn't answer. How could she explain that for a few minutes she'd felt something she hadn't felt in years, something like value, worth, as if she weren't invisible after all. As the bus rumbled through the late-night streets, taking her back to her real life of double shifts and overdue bills, Alana told herself to forget it. Men like Julian Marchand didn't exist in her world. Tomorrow he wouldn't even remember her name. She was wrong. The next morning, as she dragged herself to her weekend job at the Suds and Duds laundromat, a black town car was parked outside. A driver in a uniform stood beside it, checking his watch. When he saw her approach, he straightened. "Miss Brooks, Mr. Marchand would like to speak with you." The back door opened and there he was, Julian Marchand, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than her rent, looking at her with those same intense eyes. "Good morning, Alana," he said, as if this were a perfectly normal occurrence. "I believe we have a conversation to finish." And just like that, Alana Brooks's ordinary life was about to become extraordinary. Alana stood frozen on the sidewalk outside the laundromat. Julian Marchand was here in her neighborhood, sitting in a luxury car and looking at her like he'd been waiting all morning just to see her. "I'm working," she said finally, clutching her worn purse tighter. "I can't just leave." Julian stepped out of the car, drawing curious glances from passers-by. With his designer clothes and commanding presence, he stuck out in this neighborhood like a diamond in a coal pile. "I understand," he said. "What time do you finish?" Alana blinked in surprise. 4 o'clock. "Then I'll come back at 4. Before she could argue, he handed her a business card. "My personal number, in case you change your mind." As he turned to leave, Alana found her voice. "Why? Why me? Is this some kind of joke?" Julian paused, looking back at her with those serious eyes. "No joke. Last night was the first real moment I've had in 2 years. I'd like to know why." Then he was gone, sliding back into the car that purred away from the curb, leaving Alana staring after it with the business card clutched in her hand. Inside the laundromat, Mrs. Patel, the owner, was already sorting detergents. "You're late." "Alana, and who was that man in the fancy car?" "Nobody," Alana said quickly, tucking the card into her pocket. "Just a mix-up." The morning passed in a blur of washing machines folding tables and customers dropping off their weekly laundry. But Alana couldn't stop thinking about Julian's words. The first real moment in 2 years. What did that even mean? During her lunch break? She checked her phone and was shocked to find herself tagged in dozens of social media posts. The video of their dance had gone viral overnight. There she was, in her stained apron and borrowed shoes, being waltzed around the ballroom by one of the richest men in the country. The comments ranged from romantic to cruel. Cinderella moment. "Who is she? Gold digger alert. Julian Marchand's mystery woman." Alana quickly put her phone away, her appetite gone. She wasn't a mystery woman. She was just Alana Brooks, a woman working 3 jobs to stay afloat, who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with thin walls, who hadn't been on a real date in over 2 years because she simply didn't have the time or energy. At exactly 4 o'clock, the Blacktown car returned. This time, Julian got out and came into the laundromat, causing Mrs. Patel to nearly drop the bottle of fabric softener she was holding. "You came back," Alana said, untying her work apron. "I said I would." Julian stood awkwardly among the rumbling dryers and folding tables. In this ordinary setting, he seemed both out of place and somehow more human. "I thought maybe we could talk. Over coffee." Mrs. Patel was practically vibrating with curiosity behind the counter. "Go ahead, Alana," she urged. "I can close up." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a small cafe 3 blocks away. It wasn't fancy, just a neighborhood place with mismatched mugs and pastries that had been in the case since morning. but Julian didn't seem to mind. "The internet is talking about us," Alana said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "The internet always talks. Tomorrow it will be something else." Julian stirred his coffee, though he hadn't added anything to it. "I'm sorry if it's caused you trouble. My roommate thinks I've been hiding a secret life from her." Alana smiled despite herself. "My phone hasn't stopped buzzing since last night." Julian's expression softened slightly. "Mine too, though for different reasons. My publicity team wants to issue a statement. My friends think I've lost my mind. And Vivian Hartwell, she was sitting next to me at the gala. She's been calling non-stop." Vivian Hartwell? The woman with the diamonds? Alana remembered the look of shock on the socialite's face when Julian had asked her to dance. "We dated. Briefly. Years ago." Julian dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "It didn't work out." "I'm sure you have lots of women wanting to date you," Alana said before she could stop herself. To her surprise, Julian laughed, a short, rusty sound as if he didn't use it often. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But most people want to date my bank account, not me." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a statement of fact that made Alana look at him more closely. Behind the wealthy exterior was a man who seemed tired. Lonely, even. "Why did you ask me to dance?" she asked directly. "The truth." Julian was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug. "When the wine spilled, everyone in that room was looking at you, waiting for me to be angry, to have you fired. It was like they were hungry for it." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "But you looked at me like I was just a person who might need a napkin. Not Julian Marchand the billionaire, just a man with a stained suit." Alana hadn't expected such honesty. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But you stood your ground, you didn't cry or run away, you took responsibility." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? People either want something from me, or they're afraid of me. You were neither." They talked for over an hour about nothing important and everything that mattered. Alana told him about growing up with a single mother who'd worked at the local bakery, until arthritis made it impossible. How she'd put college on hold when her mother got sick. How she juggled multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. Julian talked about his younger sister Maria, who had died of cancer 2 years ago. How she'd been his best friend, the only person who treated him normally. How empty his life had felt since then, going through the motions of business deals and charity galas without any real joy. "She would have liked you," he said suddenly, surprising himself with the admission. "Maria, she always said I needed someone who wouldn't take my nonsense." Alana laughed. "And do I not take your nonsense? You're sitting in a cafe with a man you just met, telling him your life story, so the jury's still out." But his eyes were warm when he said it, and Alana felt something flutter in her chest. When they finally left the cafe, the sun was setting. Julian insisted on driving her home, though Alana protested that her neighborhood wasn't what he was used to. "I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment above a hardware store," he said, surprising her again. "My father worked 60 hours a week. I didn't have a neighborhood like this until after college. So how did you—" Alana gestured vaguely, meaning his current wealth. "Software design. I created a security program that every major bank wanted. Sold it for 8 figures when I was 26. Invested the money, got lucky." He said it matter-of-factly, without pride or false modesty. The rest just happened. When they reached her apartment building, a worn brick structure with window, air conditioners rattling in most units, Julian walked her to the door. "I'd like to see you again," he said simply. Alana hesitated. This was crazy. Men like Julian didn't date women like her. "Why?" "Because when I'm with you, I remember what it's like to feel something." His honesty was disarming. "But if you're not interested—" "I didn't say that," Alana interrupted. Then more cautiously, "But my life is complicated. I work all the time. I can't just drop everything because a billionaire decided I was interesting for a day." Julian nodded, respecting her directness. "Fair enough. How about tomorrow? You mentioned you're free on Sunday mornings." She hadn't expected him to remember that detail from their conversation. "Yes, but I'll pick you up at 9. Wear comfortable shoes." He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "No dancing this time, I promise." Before she could argue further, he was gone, leaving Alana standing on her doorstep wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. Sunday morning arrived clear and crisp. Alana had barely slept, alternating between excitement and anxiety. What? Did one wear on a... Was it a date, an outing, a bizarre social experiment? She settled on jeans, a simple blouse, and comfortable boots, practical but nicer than her work clothes. At exactly 9, Julian pulled up, not in the town car, but driving himself in a modest SUV. He was dressed down in jeans and a sweater, looking more like a regular guy than a billionaire. "Where are we going?" Alana asked as she buckled her seatbelt. "You'll see." 30 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a small bakery in a part of town Alana rarely visited. The sign above the door read, "Maria's Memories." "This was my sister's favorite place," Julian explained as they went inside. "She used to drag me here every Sunday. Said their cinnamon rolls were better than any 5-star restaurant. The bakery was warm and fragrant, with mismatched tables and chairs and photographs covering the walls. An elderly man behind the counter greeted Julian by name, his face lighting up. "Julian, it's been too long and you've brought a friend." "Alana, this is George. He and his wife Elaine own this place. They've been feeding me since I was nobody." George winked at Alana. He was always somebody. Just had less money and more hair back then. They settled at a corner table with coffee and cinnamon rolls that were indeed amazing. Julian pointed to a photograph on the wall, a smiling young woman with his same dark eyes, her arm thrown around his shoulders. That's Maria, on her 28th birthday, 6 months before she got sick. Alana studied the photo. The woman was beautiful, full of life. "She looks happy." She was, always, even at the end. Julian's voice grew quiet. "She made me promise not to shut down after she was gone. But I didn't know how not to. Everything seemed grey." "And now?" Alana asked softly. Julian looked at her, really looked at her. "Now, I'm sitting in my sister's favorite bakery with a woman in practical boots who doesn't care about my money. Things feel a little less grey." They spent the morning walking through the neighborhood, Julian showing her places that had meant something to Maria. The bookshop where she'd spent hours, the park bench where she'd fed pigeons despite city ordinances. Against it? "She sounds wonderful," Alana said as they sat on that same bench watching children play nearby. She was. The best person I've ever known. Julian seemed lighter somehow, sharing these memories. "What about you? Who's the best person you've known?" "My mother," Alana answered without hesitation. She worked so hard her whole life, never complained, always found ways to make even the worst situations seem better. "I'd like to meet her someday." The simple statement caught Alana off guard. Someday implied a future, more days like this one. She'd like that. She follows all the business news, knows who you are. "And what would she think about you spending time with me?" Alana laughed. "She'd think I've lost my mind. Then she'd tell me to make sure I don't lose myself instead." Wise woman. As the day went on, Alana found herself relaxing, enjoying Julian's company. He was different than she'd expected. Thoughtful, occasionally funny, more down to earth than his wealth would suggest. When he talked about his business or his charitable foundation, it was with genuine passion, not arrogance. By late afternoon, when he drove her home, something had shifted between them. A connection. Tentative but real. "Thank you for today," Julian said as they stood outside her building. "For letting me share Maria with you." "Thank you for the best cinnamon roll I've ever had," Alana replied with a smile. Julian hesitated, then reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, almost reverent. "I'd like to see you again. Maybe dinner next time?" Alana knew she should be cautious. Their worlds were too different. This couldn't possibly work. But something about the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was truly seen, made her nod. Dinner would be nice. As Julian drove away, Alana's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from him. "That night, you didn't just spill wine. You cracked something open in me. Something I thought was gone." She read it 3 times, her heart beating faster each time. Then she saved the message but didn't reply. Not yet. This was moving too fast. feeling too much like the beginning of something she wasn't sure she was ready for. But that night, as she lay in bed, she found herself smiling at the ceiling, wondering what it might be like to be the woman who brought Julian Marchand back to life. Over the next 3 weeks, Alana's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Julian called or texted her daily, working his schedule around her multiple jobs to see her whenever possible. Their dinner date turned into lunch dates, walks in the park, and quiet evenings watching old movies at her apartment. Julian sitting comfortably on her worn couch as if he belonged there. "You know, we could go to my place," he suggested one evening as they shared takeout Chinese food. "The view is pretty amazing." "I'm not ready for that," Alana said honestly. "Your world, it's intimidating." Julian set down his chopsticks. "You think I'd be different there?" "No, I think I would be." She couldn't quite explain the fear that his world, with its wealth and privilege, would only highlight how much she didn't belong. He seemed to understand without her having to say it, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "When you're ready, no pressure." That was the thing about Julian that surprised her most. His patience. He never pushed, never tried to impress her with his money or influence. When they went out, he chose simple restaurants where she felt comfortable. He listened when she talked about her mother or her struggles with bills. He laughed at her jokes and shared stories from his own past, both the humble beginnings and the high-powered present. And gradually, Alana began to see the man behind the billionaire image. The man who worked too many hours because staying busy kept the grief at bay. The man who remembered his assistant's birthday and his driver's children's names. The man who could discuss literature and old movies with the same enthusiasm as business strategies. "You're not what I expected," she told him one evening as they walked along the harbor, hand in hand. "What did you expect?" he asked, genuinely. "Curious, I don't know. Someone colder, more concerned with status, less interested in regular people." Julian smiled ruefully. "I think I was that person for a while after Maria died. Work became everything. People became transactions." He looked out at the water. "It's easy to lose yourself when the world only sees your bank account." Alana squeezed his hand. "Well, I see you now, the real you." He pulled her closer, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "That's why I can't seem to stay away from you." Their relationship was developing in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying to Alana. She was falling for him, falling hard, but the reality of their different worlds was never far from her mind. That reality came crashing in the following week. Julian had invited her to dinner at a small Italian restaurant they both enjoyed. When Alana arrived, wearing a simple dress she'd splurged on during a rare shopping trip, she found him waiting at their usual corner table. But he wasn't alone. A stunning woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer dress sat beside him, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Vivian Hartwell, the socialite from the gala. Julian stood immediately when he saw Alana, his face tight with tension. "Alana, I didn't know Vivian was coming." Vivian turned, assessing Alana with cool blue eyes. "So this is her, your charity case," she smiled thinly. "I had to see for myself." "Vivian," Julian warned, his voice low, "you should leave." "Why?" "I'm just getting to know your little server girl." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Tell me, dear, what's your angle? Do you think he's going to set you up with a nice trust fund? Buy you a pretty apartment?" Alana felt her cheeks burn. "I should go," she said quietly. "Alana." "Wait." Julian reached for her arm, but she pulled away. "No, really, it's fine. You two obviously have things to discuss." She turned and walked out, ignoring Julian calling her name. Outside, she took a deep breath of the cool evening air, trying to steady herself. She'd only made it half a block when Julian caught up to her. "Alana, please, that wasn't planned. She just showed up." "It's fine, Julian, really." Alana kept walking, not meeting his eyes. "But she's right, isn't she? This was never going to work. We're from different worlds." Julian stepped in front of her, forcing her to stop. "Look at me, please." When she finally did, his eyes were intense, almost desperate. "I don't care about our different worlds. I care about you. Only you." "And what about people like Vivian? The society page is calling. Be a gold digger?" The business associates wondering what game you're playing. All the doubts she'd been pushing away came flooding back. I'm not equipped for that kind of scrutiny, Julian. Then we'll face it together. He took her hands in his. Vivian is jealous. She always thought she'd be the one to save me after Maria died. But you're the one who made me feel again, Alana, not her, not anyone else. The sincerity in his voice made her resolve waver. I'm scared, she admitted, not of people like Vivian, but of falling for you completely and then realizing this was just a phase, an interesting diversion in your complicated life. Julian's face softened. I've never been more serious about anyone. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. Reluctantly, Alana let him lead her to his car. They drove in silence through the city, finally stopping in front of a large modern building with a sign that read, The Maria Marchand Foundation. What is this? Alana asked as he parked. Something I've been working on. Something I should have done a long time ago. Julian led her inside, using his keycard to access the empty reception area. After Maria died, I set up a foundation in her name, but it was just performative. Writing checks, attending galas, letting other people handle the details. They walked through the space, open and bright even in the evening dimness. There were classrooms, a computer lab, meeting spaces. What changed? Alana asked, running her hand along a desk. You did. Julian turned to face her. You asked me what I'd done with all my grief, remember? That first week when we were talking about Maria. Alana nodded. She'd asked him if he'd found any way to channel his pain into something productive, the way her mother had taught her to do. It made me think, Julian continued. Maria was a teacher. She believed education was the key to changing lives. So I redesigned the foundation. Now we offer scholarships, job training, mentorship programs. We focus on single parents, adults returning to education, people like you, Alana, people with potential who just need a chance. Alana was speechless, taking in the scope of what he was showing her. You did all this because of what I said? I did it because you reminded me of who I used to be, who Maria always believed I could be. He stepped closer, taking her hands. I've spent 2 years sleepwalking through life. Meeting you woke me up, made me remember that my money and influence could actually help people, not just impress them. The passion in his voice, the sincerity in his eyes, Alana felt herself falling even deeper. It's amazing, Julian, truly. There's more. He led her down a hallway to a door marked Director. Inside was a simple office with large windows overlooking the city. I want you to run it. Alana's mouth fell open. What, Julian? I don't have any experience with... You have life experience, compassion, understanding of exactly what our clients are going through. His eyes were alight with excitement. You could finish your degree, we'd pay for it, and oversee the programs here, make a real difference. For a moment, Alana was tempted. It sounded perfect, meaningful work, a chance to help others, financial security. But then the reality hit her. People would say you gave me the job because we're involved. Let them say it. I'd know it was true. She stepped back, creating distance between them. I can't accept a job from you, Julian. Not like this. His face fell. It's not charity, Alana. I believe in you. And I need to believe in myself, on my own terms. She took a deep breath. I applied for a scholarship last month before I met you, to finish my business degree. If I get it, I'll do it on my own merits. Julian was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I understand. I don't agree. But I understand. As they drove back to her apartment, the tension between them gradually eased. Julian reached over, taking her hand. I'm sorry about Vivian, about pushing too hard with the foundation job. I'm sorry I ran out, Alana replied. I guess I'm still not sure how I fit into your life. You fit perfectly, he said simply. The question is, do I fit into yours? It was the right question, one Alana had been asking herself for weeks. As they reached her building, she turned to him. Why don't you come up? I think we need to talk. Upstairs, her small apartment felt different with Julian there. Not because of his presence, which had become familiar, but because of the weight of what hung between them now. I've been holding back, she admitted, sitting beside him on the couch. Keeping parts of myself separate because I'm afraid of how this ends. Julian took her hand. How do you want it to end? That's just it. I don't. But everything in my experience says it will. Men like you don't end up with women like me, except in fairy tales. Maybe it's time to rewrite the story. Julian's voice was gentle but firm. I don't want Vivian or anyone like her. I don't want the society women who see me as a status symbol, or the business partners who want to set me up with their daughters. I want you, Alana, just you. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. How can you be so sure? We've only known each other for a month, because in that month I've felt more alive than I have in years. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm not asking for forever right now. I'm just asking you to stop waiting. For this to fall apart and start believing it might work. Something shifted in Alana's heart, a wall coming down, a fear receding. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened into something more urgent. Julian pulled her closer, his hands tangling in her hair as they lost themselves in each other. Later, curled against his side, Alana felt a peace she hadn't expected. Stay tonight, she whispered. Just to sleep. I want to wake up with you here. Julian pressed a kiss to her forehead. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. The next morning, Alana woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Julian moving around. Her tiny kitchen. Dressed in his clothes from the night before, he looked surprisingly at home. Morning, he smiled, offering her a mug. Hope you don't mind. I found the coffee maker. Not at all. Alana took the mug gratefully, studying him in the morning light. You look happy. I am. He sat beside her on the bed. What about you? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message, then another, and another. What in the world? Alana reached for her phone and felt her stomach drop. Oh no, Julian leaned over. What is it? Alana showed him the screen, a photo of them from the night before kissing outside her apartment building. The headline read, Marchand's server girl, more than a dance? It's everywhere, she said, scrolling through more messages. Someone must have followed us. Julian's jaw tightened. I'm so sorry, Alana, this is exactly what you were afraid of. It's not your fault. She set the phone down, but it does make everything more complicated. Before Julian could respond, there was a loud knock at her door. Alana wrapped her robe tighter and went to answer it, expecting her nosy neighbor. Instead, she found herself face to face with a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. Miss Brooks, he said, his voice cold. I'm Alexander Marchand, Julian's brother and business partner. We need to talk. Behind her, Julian appeared in the doorway, his expression hardening at the sight of his brother. Alexander, what are you doing here? Damage control. Alexander held up his phone, showing the same photo that had just upended Alana's morning. The board is meeting in an hour. We need to discuss how to handle in this situation. The way he said situation, his eyes flicking dismissively over Alana, made her blood boil. But before she could speak, Julian stepped forward. There is no situation to handle, he said firmly. Alana and I are together. That's all anyone needs to know. Alexander's laugh was short and humorless. That's naive, even for you, Julian. This girl, her name is Alana, Julian interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. Fine, Alana. Alexander emphasized the name with barely concealed disdain. Do you have any idea what this looks like? Our investors are already calling. The Westfield deal could fall apart over this. Over what exactly? Alana found her voice. Two consenting adults dating? Alexander turned to her, his expression cold. Over Julian Marchand, who hasn't been seen with a woman in 2 years, suddenly. Carrying on a public affair with a server he met at a charity gala. It looks like a midlife crisis at best, a scandal at worst. That's enough. Julian moved to stand beside Alana, his arm going around her waist. I'm not discussing this here. If the board wants to meet, fine. But Alana isn't a topic for discussion. Alexander studied them both, something calculating in his eyes. You're serious about her? Completely. Then you're a fool. Alexander straightened his already perfect tie. "I'll see you at the office. Don't be late." With that, he turned and left, the door closing firmly behind him. In the silence that followed, Alana felt a tremor run through Julian. Not fear, but anger, barely controlled. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said finally. "Is he right?" Alana asked quietly. "About your investors, the deals?" Julian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Possibly. Some of our older, more conservative clients might be concerned, but it doesn't matter." "Of course it matters. Your business is just a business." Julian turned to face her fully. "What I feel for you matters more." The conviction in his voice made Alana's heart swell, but the practical part of her, the part that had been managing tight budgets and hard choices for years, couldn't ignore reality. "You should go to that meeting," she said. "Handle this properly. We have time to figure things out." Julian studied her face. "You're not running away?" "No." Alana smiled, a new determination strengthening her resolve. "I think it's time. I stopped hiding and started fighting. For us." Julian pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I was hoping you'd say that." As he left for the meeting, promising to call her as soon as it was over, Alana felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. Their private bubble had burst, exposing their relationship to the harsh light of public scrutiny and judgment. But for the first time in her life, Alana felt something worth fighting for. Something that mattered more than her fears. What she didn't know was that Alexander Marchand was already making calls of his own, calls that would put her relationship with Julian to the ultimate test. The next week tested Alana in ways she never expected. Her phone rang constantly with calls from reporters seeking interviews. Co-workers who had barely noticed her before now watched her every move, some with envy, others with thinly disguised contempt. Even her landlord stopped by, hinting that the sudden attention might violate some obscure clause in her lease about maintaining a low profile. But the worst was the online speculation. People who had never met her dissected her life, her motives, her worth. Old photos from her social media accounts surfaced. Someone even tracked down her high school yearbook picture. "Don't read the comments," Julian advised during their nightly phone calls. The board meeting had stretched into days of damage control, keeping him busier than usual. "Hard not to when people are sharing them directly to my profiles," Alana replied, trying to keep her voice light despite the knot in her stomach. Julian sighed heavily. "I'm sorry. This will die down eventually." But they both knew it wouldn't. Not really. As long as they were together, Alana would be subject to this kind of scrutiny. The question was whether their relationship was strong enough to withstand it. On Friday morning, Alana arrived at the Suds and Duds laundromat to find Mrs. Patel looking troubled. "Someone's been asking questions about you," the older woman said. "A man in an expensive suit, very polite, but something about him didn't feel right." Alana's heart sank. "Did he leave a name?" "No, but he left this." Mrs. Patel handed her a business card, not Alexander's as Alana had feared, but from a private investigator. That evening, when Julian finally managed to come over, Alana showed him the card. His face darkened with anger. "Alexander," he said, his voice tight. "This has his fingerprints all over it. Why would he hire someone to investigate me? What does he think he'll find?" Julian paced her small living room. "Anything he can use." "Alexander believes everyone has a price or a secret." He stopped, turning to her with worried eyes. "Is there anything? Anything at all he might try to use against you?" Alana thought carefully. "I've never been arrested, never done drugs. Paid my taxes late once when Mom was in the hospital, but I set up a payment plan." She shrugged. "I'm pretty boring, honestly." Julian's expression softened. "You're anything but boring." He sat beside her, taking her hands. "But Alexander won't stop. He sees you as a threat to everything we've built." "Why? Because I don't fit the image of the kind of woman you should be with?" "Because he can't control you." Julian's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "And by extension, he can't control me when I'm with you." That weekend, Julian insisted on taking Alana away from the city to a small beach house he owned about 2 hours up the coast. "We both need a break," he said. "Just 2 days with no reporters, no Alexander, no judgmental stares." The beach house wasn't what Alana expected. Instead of a mansion, it was a modest cabin overlooking the water with weathered cedar siding and a wide porch. Inside was comfortable but simple, more like a family retreat than a billionaire's showplace. "Maria and I bought this together," Julian explained as they walked along the shore that evening. "We promised each other it would never be renovated or improved. This was our place to be normal." Alana understood then why he'd brought her here. This wasn't just an escape. It was an invitation into the most private part of his life, the part he shared with his beloved sister. That night, sitting on the porch watching the moonlight on the water, Julian seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "I've been thinking," he said, his arm around her shoulders, "about what you said, finishing your degree on your own terms." "I haven't heard back about the scholarship yet," Alana admitted. Between the media frenzy and work, she'd almost forgotten about her application. "Whatever happens, I respect that you want to make your own way." Julian turned to face her. "But I want you to know something. My feelings for you, they're not dependent on you staying exactly as you are now. I want to see you grow, achieve your dreams, become whoever you want to be." His words warmed her heart. For so long, Alana had clung to her independence, afraid that accepting help meant losing herself. But Julian wasn't asking her to change. He was offering to support her journey, whatever it might be. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said softly, the admission both terrifying and freeing. Julian's smile was like sunrise. "I know I'm falling in love with you." He kissed her then, and for a perfect moment there was no outside world, just them, the sound of waves, and the promise of something real growing between them. Their sanctuary was shattered the next day when Julian received an urgent call from his office. As he spoke in low tones on the porch, Alana could see the tension returning to his shoulders, the furrow deepening between his brows. "We have to go back," he said when he hung up. "Alexander has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. They're voting on whether to remove me as CEO. Can he do that? With enough support from the board, yes." Julian ran a hand through his hair. "Our largest client is threatening to pull out. Alexander is using it as leverage." The drive back to the city was quiet, both of them lost in thought. This was exactly what Alana had feared, that their relationship would cost Julian something irreplaceable. His company wasn't just a business. It was the legacy he'd built, the empire he'd created from nothing. "Maybe we should take a step back," she suggested as they neared the city. "Just until things settle down." Julian glanced at her sharply. "Is that what you want?" "Of course not, but I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. You think I'd choose the company over you?" His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I think you shouldn't have to choose at all." Alana looked out the window at the familiar skyline coming into view. "But Alexander is forcing that choice, isn't he?" When they reached her apartment, Julian insisted on coming up, even though he had meetings to prepare for. "We're not ending this," he said firmly once they were inside. "Not because of Alexander, not because of the board, not because of public opinion." "Julian, no." He took her hands, his gaze intense. "I lost 2 years of my life after Maria died. I was breathing but not living. You changed that. You made me feel again. You made me care again. I won't go back to that half-life." His passion was overwhelming, and Alana realized, looking into his eyes, that she didn't want to go back either. Back to her careful, lonely existence where she kept the world at arm's length. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We fight, together." He squeezed her hands. "Come to the board meeting with me." Alana's eyes widened. "Me? But I'm the problem they're meeting about." "Exactly. Let them see you, the real you, not the caricature Alexander has painted." His eyes sparked with determination. "Let them see us together." It was a bold move, perhaps even a reckless one. But Alana was tired of hiding, tired of letting others define her worth. "Okay," she agreed, "but I'll need something to wear." Julian laughed, the tension breaking slightly. "I think we can manage that." The next morning, Alana stood beside Julian in the elevator, rising to the top floor of the Marchand Investments building. She wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, purchased That morning from a department store, not a boutique. Her hair was pulled back in a neat twist, her makeup minimal. She looked professional, confident, but still herself. "Ready?" Julian asked as the elevator doors opened. Alana took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." The boardroom fell silent as they entered together. 12 men and women in expensive suits sat around a massive table, expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Alexander stood at the head of the table, his surprise at seeing Alana quickly masked by a cold smile. "Julian, I wasn't aware you were bringing a guest." "Not a guest, my partner." Julian's voice was firm as he led Alana to 2 empty chairs. "If we're discussing my personal life and how it affects this company, Alana has every right to be here." A murmur ran through the room. One of the older board members, a woman with steel grey hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Marchand, while we appreciate your candor, this is highly irregular. So is voting to remove a CEO because of who he's dating," Julian countered. "But here we are." Alexander cleared his throat. "This isn't about who you're dating, Julian. It's about judgment, stability, the image we present to our clients." He slid a folder across the table. "The Westfield Group has expressed serious concerns about the direction of the company. They're prepared to withdraw their portfolio, worth over 300 million, unless changes are made at the executive level." "Meaning me," Julian said flatly. "Their words, not mine." Alana watched the exchange, feeling the weight of judgment from around the table. These people saw her as nothing, more than a liability, a poor decision Julian had made. The familiar urge to shrink, to make herself invisible, washed over her. But then she remembered how Julian had looked at her that first night, like she mattered, how he'd seen her when no one else did. "May I speak?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Alexander looked surprised, then amused. "By all means, Ms. Brooks, the floor is yours." Alana stood, straightening her shoulders. "I understand how this looks to all of you. Julian Marchand dating a woman who serves drinks at parties you attend. It seems inappropriate, even suspicious." She met each person's gaze as she spoke. "You're wondering what I want from him, what angle I'm playing." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "The truth is simple. I care about Julian. Not his money, not his position, not what he can do for me, just him." She turned to Alexander. "I know you've had me investigated. Did your detective find anything worth sharing?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "This isn't—" "Did he?" Alana pressed. "No," Alexander admitted reluctantly. "Nothing of consequence, because there's nothing to find. I'm exactly who I appear to be. A woman who works hard, takes care of her mother, and tries to build a better life." Alana looked around the table again. "I didn't ask for the attention that came with dating Julian. I didn't ask to be photographed, or written about or discussed in boardrooms like this one." She took a breath, steadying herself. "But I'm not ashamed of who I am, and I won't apologize for caring about a man who deserves to be cared about for himself, not his bank account." The key. Room was silent when she finished. Julian reached for her hand, squeezing it gently as she sat down. Then the woman with the steel grey hair spoke. "Well, that was refreshing." She turned to Alexander. "I've sat on this board for 15 years, longer than anyone else in this room. I've watched Julian build this company from nothing." Her sharp eyes focused on him. "I've also watched him withdraw from life these past 2 years, move through his days like a ghost." She nodded to Alana. "If this young woman has brought him back to the land of the living, I fail to see how that negatively impacts his ability to run this company. In fact, quite the opposite." Another board member, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, nodded in agreement. "The Westfield Group has been threatening to leave for years. They use any excuse to renegotiate their rates. This is just their latest tactic." "We're talking about hundreds of millions in assets," Alexander insisted. "We're talking about using Julian's personal life as a weapon against him," the older woman corrected. "I, for one, won't be party to it." One by one, other board members voiced similar sentiments. Not all, there were still those who looked skeptically at Alana, but enough that Alexander's leverage was clearly slipping away. Finally, Julian stood. "I founded this company on 2 principles, integrity and innovation. I've never let fear of losing a client dictate how we operate, and I won't start now." His voice strengthened. "If the board has lost confidence in my leadership, I'll accept that. But I won't choose between my personal happiness and this company. They aren't mutually exclusive." Alexander's face had grown increasingly rigid as the room turned against him. "This isn't over, Julian," he said quietly. "The Westfield account will stay or go based on our performance, not our personal lives," Julian finished for him. "And if they go, we'll survive. We always have." The vote, when it finally came, was decisively in Julian's favor. Alexander left the boardroom without another word, his defeat evident in the stiff set of his shoulders. As the other board members filed out, many nodded respectfully to Alana. The woman with the steel-grey hair paused beside her. "I'm Margaret Whitfield," she said, extending her hand. "Julian's first investor, back when all he had was a good idea and stubborn determination." Alana shook her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Ms. Whitfield." "Call me Margaret." The older woman smiled slightly. "You have courage, young lady. This company could use more of that." With a knowing glance between Alana and Julian, she added, "I look forward to seeing what comes next." When they were finally alone in the boardroom, Julian pulled Alana into his arms. "You were incredible," he murmured against her hair. "I've never seen Alexander so thoroughly shut down." "I was terrified," Alana admitted, her heart still racing. "You didn't show it." Julian pulled back to look at her. "You stood your ground in a room full of people who've spent their lives intimidating others. Do you have any idea how remarkable you are?" Alana smiled, a new confidence filling her. "I'm starting to." They left the building hand in hand, stepping out into the bright midday sun. Photographers waited on the sidewalk, cameras ready. "Are you sure about this?" Alana asked quietly. "Once we walk out there together," Julian squeezed her hand. "I've never been more sure of anything." As they moved toward the waiting cameras, Julian suddenly stopped. Turning to Alana, he said clearly, for everyone to hear, "I love you, Alana. Brooks, every part of you. The woman who spilled wine on my suit. The woman who reads to her mother every Sunday. The woman who just faced down a boardroom of executives without flinching." Tears pricked Alana's eyes. "I love you too." The cameras flashed around them, capturing the moment. But for once, Alana didn't care who was watching. She was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Alana stood nervously in the entrance of the same glass-domed ballroom where she and Julian had first danced. The annual Blackstone Gala was underway, but this time she wasn't carrying a serving tray or wearing a uniform. She smoothed the skirt of her midnight blue evening gown, simple but elegant, chosen because it made her feel confident, not because of its designer label. The scholarship she'd applied for had come through, allowing her to return to college. Between classes and studying, she'd also started volunteering at the Maria Marchand Foundation, using her experience to help others like herself. "You look beautiful," Julian said, appearing beside her in his tuxedo, a different one than the night of the wine spill, though he'd kept the stained one as a memento. "Still nervous," Alana admitted. Although the media frenzy had eventually died down, being Julian's date at such a public event still felt surreal. "Don't be. Half the people here wish they could spill wine on me just to get my attention." His eyes crinkled with humor. "But I only have eyes for the original." As they moved through the crowd, Alana was surprised by how many people greeted her warmly. Margaret Whitfield introduced her to other business leaders. The foundation's supporters wanted to hear her ideas. Even some of the socialites who had initially snubbed her now sought her out. And then Alana saw her, Vivian Hartwell, as glamorous as ever in a designer gown, watching them from across the room. Julian followed Alana's gaze and squeezed her hand. "Want to say hello?" "Actually, yes." Alana squared her shoulders and walked toward the woman who had once dismissed her as a charity case. Vivian's perfect eyebrows arched as they approached. "Julian, Ms. Brooks." Her tone was cool, but not openly hostile. "Vivian," Julian nodded politely. "You look well," Alana said, meaning it. "That color suits you." Surprise flickered across Vivian's face at the genuine compliment. Thank you. She glanced between them, noting their clasped hands. I see things are progressing. They are, Julian confirmed. Vivian studied Alana with new eyes. You know, when I saw you that first night, in that stained apron looking terrified, I never thought you'd last. Neither did I, Alana admitted honestly. A grudging respect appeared in Vivian's expression. Well, you proved me wrong. She lifted her champagne glass slightly. Congratulations on that. As Vivian walked away, Alana felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she was carrying. The last shadow of doubt, of not belonging, faded away. Dance. With me? Julian asked, leading her toward the dance floor. The same orchestra from that fateful night began to play a waltz. This time, Alana moved with confidence, following Julian's lead as if they'd been dancing together for years. Happy? He asked softly. More than I ever thought possible, Alana replied, meaning every word. As they turned beneath the crystal chandeliers, Alana caught sight of a woman in an expensive gown watching them from the edge of the ballroom. There was something calculating in her expression, something that reminded Alana of Alexander. Julian followed her gaze. Caroline Westfield, he explained quietly. James Westfield's wife. The Westfield group did pull their account as Alexander predicted. I'm sorry, Alana said. Don't be. We've already replaced that business twice over. Julian's smile was serene. Alexander underestimated both of us. Caroline Westfield made her way toward them, her expression fixed in a society smile. As she reached them, she spoke loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. You really think this will last? She was the help, Julian. She still is. The music seemed to falter. Conversations paused. Alana felt Julian tense beside her, anger flashing in his eyes. But before he could respond, Alana spoke, her voice clear and steady. I was, and I'm not ashamed of that. Hard work never diminishes a person's worth. It reveals it. Julian's face filled with pride as he gazed at her. Then he turned to Caroline, taking Alana's hand firmly in his. Let them see what love looks like when it isn't bought, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. As Caroline Westfield retreated, speechless for perhaps the first time in her privileged life, Julian pulled Alana close and kissed her. Right. There in the middle of the ballroom, in front of everyone, applause broke out around them. Not from everyone, but from enough people that Alana felt, finally, that she belonged in this world. Not because of Julian's money or influence, but because she had earned her place through courage, integrity, and love. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the harbor, Julian handed her a small velvet box. What's this? Alana asked, her heart suddenly racing. Open it. Inside wasn't a ring as she'd half expected, but a key with a small tag attached. The tag read, The Rooftop. Your building rooftop? Alana asked, confused. She'd taken Julian there once to show him where she liked to watch sunsets when life became overwhelming. Julian nodded. I bought the building, not for me, for the foundation. We're converting it to affordable housing for single parents going back to school. His eyes were soft in the moonlight. But I made sure the rooftop would always be accessible. Always. Be a place where people could go to dream bigger dreams. Tears filled Alana's eyes. That's the most perfect gift anyone has ever given me. There's more, Julian said softly. But that comes later, when you're ready. They both knew what he meant. A future together, marriage, perhaps a family someday. But unlike the fairy tales, there was no rush to the ending. Their story was still unfolding one day at a time. Alana tucked the key carefully into her evening bag, then leaned into Julian's embrace. Below them, the harbor waters reflected the stars. Just as they had the night, a wineglass tipped, a tray clattered, and a billionaire with a wounded heart reached out to a woman in a stained apron who had never expected to be seen. What had started as an accident had become the most beautiful surprise of their lives. And though their worlds had once seemed impossibly far apart, they had found their way to each other, proving that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most perfect endings.